This is Medical Device Legal News. Today is October 24th, 2023. I'm Sam Bernstein. On October 19th, Dorothea Thomas and Siobhan Booker were sentenced to 6 years in prison for engaging in theft and vendor fraud by allegedly submitting fraudulent claims through their company Integrity Medical and Physician Supplies to the Illinois Medicaid program. Allegedly, they submitted claims for diabetic supplies that were not provided to patients. This case reflects a continued trend of increased state AG-driven enforcement, which we've seen over the past year, and is yet another example of the government's recent focus on DME POS supplier healthcare fraud. On October 18th, Mark Shana, the president of Array Corporation, in a case eerily similar to the Theranos case, was sentenced to 8 years in prison in order to pay $24 million for defrauding investors regarding fake or inaccurate blood and COVID-19 tests, and for engaging in healthcare fraud by paying kickbacks to marketers and submitting fraudulent claims to Medicare and commercial insurers for unnecessary allergy testing. Shana allegedly paid kickbacks to marketers to obtain blood specimens in order to bill Medicare and private insurers for allegedly fake blood allergy tests. He also announced that Array had developed the COVID-19 test when in fact the FDA had indicated that the test was not accurate enough to receive emergency use authorization. In addition, he claimed that government officials mandated allergy testing whenever a patient received COVID-19 testing, and required patients that received the Array COVID-19 test to also receive a broad panel of allergy tests. Some of Shana's claims similarly echoed Theranos claims, including that they had developed a revolutionary technology to test for any disease by using a single drop of blood from a finger stick. On October 19th, Exogen Incorporated, a life sciences company that makes diagnostic tests for the treatment of autoimmune conditions, had agreed to pay north of $650,000 to resolve allegations that it paid specimen processing fees to referring physicians to induce them to use Exogen lab tests in violation of the federal anti-kickback statute. In 2014, the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services had released a special fraud alert that cautioned laboratories that paying referring physicians specimen processing fees could raise concerns under the anti-kickback statute, particularly in light of the fact that Medicare reimbursement was available for certain specimen collection services. The settlement is based on conduct commencing after June 25th, 2014, which is the same date as the release of the special fraud alert. This case is interesting and relevant to medical device and life sciences companies, and that it shows the relative ease with which the DOJ can prosecute cases involving conduct where the government has released guidance warning that such conduct may violate fraud and abuse laws. Specifically, where the government has expressly released guidance warning that certain conduct may raise fraud and abuse concerns, it may be easier for the government to prove the mens rea elements required for certain criminal laws, including under the federal anti-kickback statute to show someone engaged in a knowing violation. It may also be easier for the government to prove that a medical device manufacturer life sciences company caused its customers to submit a false claim with reckless disregard if it can show that there was express guidance warning that that conduct was violative of the applicable fraud and abuse laws. Accordingly, life sciences companies should ensure that they keep abreast of compliance guidance issued by governmental agencies. Notable recent fraud and abuse guidance documents may include the July 2022 special fraud alert regarding fraudulent telemedicine arrangements, as well as the November 2020 special fraud alert regarding speakers programs. On October 19th, the FDA published updated final guidance regarding its enforcement policy for non-invasive remote monitoring devices used to support patient monitoring. Non-invasive remote monitoring devices acquire patient physiological data to facilitate patient management by healthcare providers while reducing the need for in-office or in-hospital services. The guidance applies to certain modified legally marketed non-invasive remote monitoring devices. It provides that the FDA does not intend to object to limited modifications to the indications, functionality, or hardware or software of certain of these devices without the submission of a pre-market notification in order to allow for increased remote monitoring capability where the modifications do not create undue risk and do not directly affect the physiological parameter measurement algorithm. Such changes may include a change to the indications regarding use in the home setting or hardware or software changes to allow for increased remote monitoring capability. The guidance also includes certain labeling recommendations and recommends that such changes be designed, evaluated, and validated in accordance with current FDA-recognized standards. As you're aware, the FDA's guidance documents do not generally establish legally enforceable responsibilities, unless specific regulatory or statutory requirements are cited. And if and when finalized, generally FDA guidance rather describes the agency's current thinking on a topic and primarily should be reviewed as recommendations. On October 17th, Oxygen Plus Incorporated, another DME POS supplier, agreed to pay $200,000 to resolve allegations that it violated the False Claims Act by billing Medicare and Medicaid for respiratory device rentals after patients ceased using the products or no longer needed the products. This is yet another example of the government's aggressive posture regarding prosecuting DME POS supplier fraud. On October 10th, in another DME POS case, Eric Karlowitz, the owner of a marketing company, pled guilty to conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback statute and conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. The alleged $127 million durable medical equipment fraud scheme allegedly involved Karlowitz's company targeting Medicare and TRICARE beneficiaries to pressure them to agree to accept medically unnecessary DME. Then Karlowitz's company allegedly paid kickbacks to telemedicine companies, which in turn paid kickbacks to doctors to obtain fraudulent orders for the DME. The company then sent the orders to DME suppliers around the country, which then paid kickbacks to Karlowitz's company after receiving reimbursement from Medicare and Medicaid. Karlowitz faces up to 15 years in prison and a fine of the greater of $500,000 or twice the gross gain or loss from the conspiracy. In a similar case on October 6th, Dr. Alex Klotster was charged with healthcare fraud for allegedly defrauding Medicare of $5.6 million in medically unnecessary durable medical equipment and cancer genetic testing. Dr. Klotster allegedly signed thousands of orders for DME and CGX tests for Medicare beneficiaries that he never saw, spoke to, or otherwise treated. Dr. Klotster was paid on a set fee per order basis by the telemedicine company. He faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine of the greater of $250,000 or twice the gain or loss. On October 13th, Mark Wright, the former CEO of Delore Technologies, a Utah-based medical device company, pled guilty to misdemeanor charges of causing the introduction of misbranded and adulterated devices into interstate commerce. Delore sold the SphenoCath, a device intended to treat migraines by administering nerve blocks to the sphenopalatine ganglion, a collection of nerves in the midface of the skull. Delore did not seek pre-market clearance or approval for the SphenoCath, despite the FDA's prior recommendation that they proceed with investigational studies. Instead, Wright and Delore marketed the SphenoCath to treat migraines and provided healthcare providers with marketing and materials and directions to use the non-compliant product. This case is an important reminder of the need to ensure that products are not marketed until after the FDA has approved or cleared a pre-market submission, unless product is exempt from pre-market submission requirements. It's also a good opportunity to pause and remind medical device manufacturers and the greater life sciences community to ensure that when they make changes to their products, that they should be carefully reviewing those changes to determine whether or not a new application, such as a 510K, needs to be submitted to the FDA. On October 10th, Cardiac Imaging Incorporated and its founder and CEO, Sam Cantrellopoli, agreed to pay $85.48 million to resolve federal False Claims Act, anti-kickback statute, and Stark Law allegations that they paid referring cardiologists excessive fees to supervise PET scans. Cardiologists were allegedly paid above fair market value fees of $500 or more per hour, were also paid for time when they were away from cardiac imaging's mobile scanning units, while for time that they spent providing care to other patients, for time that they allegedly spent when they were not on site. Cardiac Imaging and Cantrellopoli also entered into a 5-year corporate integrity agreement in connection with the settlement. This case is interesting and relevant to life sciences and medical device companies in particular because of the need for these companies to engage healthcare provider consultants to provide a wide range of services, from training other healthcare providers to helping develop products, among other activities. Cardiac Imaging in this case had received a fair market value analysis from a consulting firm regarding the fees that it would pay the referring cardiologists for providing PET supervision services. The government alleged that Cardiac Imaging knew that the fair market valuation, which was ultimately withdrawn, was predicated on inaccurate information regarding the services to be provided by the supervising physicians. When life sciences and medical device companies engage valuation consultants to value and conduct a fair market value analysis regarding the services to be provided by healthcare provider consultants, it's important for manufacturers to adopt a number of protective safeguards. Included among those safeguards are ensuring that the consultant that is conducting the valuation has the appropriate experience and is qualified to value compensation arrangements in the healthcare industry in a manner consistent with applicable fraud and abuse laws. It's also important to ensure that the consultant that is conducting the valuation is provided with accurate and complete information necessary for the consultant to conduct the valuation. It is also important for the services to be provided by the healthcare provider consultant to ensure that they are bona fide and that there's a bona fide business need for the company to engage the consultant. Typically, best practice would involve conducting a needs assessment on an annual basis to determine healthcare provider consultant needs throughout a year, to develop a panel of potential candidates with their expertise and qualifications, and to establish a budget for healthcare provider consultants early on at the beginning of the year so that there's an appropriate architecture in place to ensure that consultants are only retained when needed. Additional protective measures that medical device and life sciences companies should implement include ensuring that the services that are provided by the healthcare provider consultant are bona fide, that the consultant healthcare provider was selected due to their experience and expertise, not because of the volume of business that they have generated or expected to generate. And the company should absolutely ensure that they do not unduly influence the outcome of the valuation. Particularly, oftentimes companies may be hoping for a particular range of valuation, but it's important to provide the valuation consultant with broad discretion without putting your finger on the scale to determine what the appropriate fair market range of compensation is for a healthcare provider consultant. While fair market valuations are helpful in establishing that a manufacturer is not providing excess compensation to a healthcare provider consultant, there is a history of enforcement actions where the government has shown that a valuation was inaccurate. There are also cases where a fair market payment to a healthcare provider consultant for bona fide services, even though the compensation was fair market value, the payment was deemed a kickback in light of clear evidence that one of the reasons that the physician had been engaged and was being paid was to induce or reward their purchases and referrals. Accordingly, it's very important for medical device manufacturers and life science companies to understand that while having a fair market valuation is helpful, it does not provide full protection against fraud and enforcement actions. And accordingly, it is exceedingly important to adopt an effective compliance program that requires compliance personnel to review healthcare provider relationships to ensure that financial relationships with healthcare providers are not used to generate business. On October 10th, the FDA released final guidance regarding pre-market notifications for magnetic resonance diagnostic devices. Among other changes, the guidance updates standards regarding the magnetic field hazard area and addresses FDA-recognized standards for such devices. It also clarifies that while protocols recommended for specific applications, such as a pediatric brain scan, may not be considered a new indication, protocols directed at disease-specific or diagnostic claims may be considered new indications. The guidance also includes good examples of device modifications that the FDA would view as requiring a new 510(k) submission. On October 10th, the FDA also released final guidance regarding testing and labeling of medical devices for safety in a magnetic resonance environment. The guidance provides recommendations on testing to assess the safety and compatibility of medical devices in the MRI environment and the recommended format for MRI safety information and medical device labeling, as well as recommendations for the inclusion of such information in pre-market submissions. The guidance applies to all medical devices that might be used in the MR environment, including all implanted medical devices that are fastened to or carried by a patient, medical devices that would reasonably be anticipated to enter the MR environment during clinical care, as well as all medical devices that are intended to enter the MR environment. The guidance provides that medical device labeling should include a separate section regarding MRI safety information, that it should include sufficient information for a healthcare provider to determine whether a device can safely enter the magnetic resonance environment, that the device should be labeled as either MR safe, MR unsafe, or MR conditional, and then it should also include information for patients so they can understand whether or not they can enter the MR environment. It also recommends that for MR unsafe implantable and fastened or carried products, that patients should be provided with a medical device card reflecting the MR status of the device and warning the patients regarding the risk of entering the magnetic resonance environment. The guidance document references a number of FDA-recognized consensus standards that can be used in assessing the safety of a medical device within the MR environment. In addition, the guidance also clarifies that depending on the composition of a device, it may be possible to use scientific rationale rather than testing to support an MR safe indication. On Tuesday, October 31st, the FDA will be hosting a webinar regarding its proposed rule regarding laboratory developed tests, which is proposed earlier this month. The proposed rule explicitly asserts that in vitro diagnostic products or devices under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, including when the manufacturer of the IVD is a laboratory, and establishes a phase-out policy over 4 years for the FDA to regulate laboratory-developed tests in the same manner that it regulates IVDs. Once implemented and finalized, tests offered as LDTs that do not meet the applicable regulatory requirements, including requirements for pre-market review and quality system regulation, are expected to come off the market. Thank you for joining me this week for Medical Device Legal News. I'm Sam Bernstein, a partner of McGuire Healthcare Group. I would also like to thank my colleague Sophie Morris for helping to make today's program possible. I look forward to seeing you next time.